Picture this, right at this moment, as you're viewing this, one of the planet's most dominant financial powerhouses is silently, purposefully, and systematically withdrawing from New York City. This isn't some symbolic gesture or hypothetical threat. It's already in motion, a finished reality. Consider this JPMorgan Chase, so intertwined with New York's essence that its name graces towering buildings throughout Manhattan's skyline, is carrying out a deliberate exit that people inside the finance world describe as the start of the downfall for the nation's premier metropolis. Envision opening your eyes one day to grasp that the very bank instrumental in constructing your city has concluded it's no longer worth the gamble to remain. Picture the wealthiest, most influential mayor's administration in the country, a leader elected on vows of fairness in the economy and daring change, now seething with anger, openly and unmistakably enraged. Because the truth the major media outlets refuse to face is this: once JP Morgan begins shifting course, the rest tend to trail behind, and the events unfolding in New York aren't merely a corporate headline, they're an alarm bell. Ignore it, and you'll overlook precisely what lies ahead. Hello everyone, Sophia Miller here. Today, I'm guiding you through what is undoubtedly one of the most urgent economic developments currently underway across the United States. Stories like this get shoved to the back pages by mainstream outlets, if they're mentioned at all. Yet you have every right to grasp what's truly transpiring in New York City, and far more crucially, what implications it carries for your own situation. Before we get into the details, I have a quick question, and I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments immediately. Do you believe New York City can hold on over the coming 5 years without a massive exodus of major companies? Yes or no? Let me know, because I'm truly curious about how folks from every corner of the country perceive this from afar. I'm Sophia Miller, and this channel has one core focus: tracking the flow of capital. We reveal the genuine actions of influential organizations, not just their public statements, and equip you to make sense of the economic and political dynamics influencing your daily existence, whether you're based in New York, Nebraska, or anywhere else. If you haven't joined the channel yet, go ahead and hit subscribe now, then turn on notifications. Here's the reason this is especially pressing at this moment: the JP Morgan developments are evolving live. New aspects will keep surfacing in the weeks ahead, and without being subscribed, you'll miss those updates. This narrative hasn't wrapped up neatly. It's only beginning to gain momentum. Stick around, because the evidence I'm about to lay out will reshape your understanding of the challenges facing cities throughout America. Let me paint the broader picture. For generations, stretching all the way back to the post-war prosperity surge of the 1940s and 1950s, New York City stood unchallenged as the globe's financial nerve center. Period. No debate. International investors seeking secure, impactful places to commit funds headed straight to New York. Prestigious Fortune 500 firms eager to broadcast status and influence established their main offices along Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue, and the gleaming high rises of Midtown. During the 1980s and 1990s, despite the crack crisis, budget shortfalls, and visible urban decline, Wall Street powered ahead relentlessly. The finance industry didn't merely endure the city's chaos, it flourished within it. JPMorgan Chase, tracing its roots through various incarnations all the way to JP Morgan in the 1800s, has served as a cornerstone of the city's economic foundation for more than a century and a half. That alliance between the city's political leaders and its banking giants was always pragmatic, occasionally strained, yet essentially workable. The city relied on the revenue from taxes, the banks depended on the skilled workforce, the physical setup, and closeness to authority. It functioned as a partnership born of necessity, and for decades it delivered results. But gradually, then with growing speed, and now, pay close attention to the indicators. Abruptly, things changed. The partnership started unraveling. Operating expenses in New York escalated beyond what could reasonably be managed. Even more critically, the political atmosphere began broadcasting messages that no patient executive team could overlook. And today, we're witnessing the fallout from a 150-year union finally dissolving, not through some explosive confrontation, but through a series of measured, deliberate, and deeply damaging corporate moves that the city's current mayor is only starting to truly register. Here are some figures that should stun you. Based on thorough economic studies and financial disclosures, JPMorgan Chase has been carefully assessing its presence in New York City. The conclusions from those internal reviews spell disaster for the city's future financial stability. Start with this key statistic: New York City's total state plus local tax load on large corporations hovers around 13.7%, one of the steepest effective corporate tax levels among major U.S. urban centers. Let that sink in: 13.7%. When rivals in Texas face virtually no state corporate income tax and those in Florida run on far lower overhead, the 13.7% isn't merely a statistic, it's a direct punishment for remaining committed. Next figure. Recent IRS migration statistics show New York City hemorrhaged roughly $19 billion in adjusted gross income due to residents and entities leaving in one measured time frame. That's no minor fluctuation or trivial amount. It's $19 billion of real economic vitality, individuals, enterprises, capital relocated southward and westward, unlikely to return. To put it plainly, $19 billion exceeds the yearly budgets of plenty of mid-sized states. It could cover New York City's education department for years, upgrade transit systems, rebuild subways, or add thousands of officers to the force. Instead, it's vanished. Final figure, and this one ought to leave you speechless. JPMorgan Chase employs about 300,000 people worldwide, with its biggest historical cluster in New York. Experts monitoring the company's property usage have observed a clear, recorded pivot toward growth in certain locations and downsizing in others. Growth is happening in Columbus, Ohio, Plano, Texas, Tampa, Florida. Downsizing, you guessed it, New York. The clincher JPMorgan CEO, Jamie Dimon, a leader known for straight talk on New York's difficulties, has openly confirmed that the city's expenses, rules, and employee lifestyle issues all play into their extended geographic planning. This comes straight from the head of a $500 billion powerhouse stated publicly. We're not discussing minor staff adjustments. This is a multi-year strategic realignment by one of America's most significant financial entities. That's not routine HR, it's a judgment. And the judgment reads, New York City's extra costs no longer make sense. But what truly hits hard is this: JP Morgan isn't going solo, far from it. Goldman Sachs has poured major resources into expanding in Dallas, Texas, not for the cuisine, but because the financial equation favors Texas in ways New York no longer matches. BlackRock, the planet's top asset manager, headquartered right in New York City and overseeing more than $10 trillion, has been steadily growing its operations in Florida, a place offering zero income tax, welcoming business policies, and a governor who pursues corporate moves rather than scolding them on fairness. Then there's Citadel. Ken Griffin, among the most accomplished hedge fund leaders ever, didn't merely open a branch in Miami. He relocated there openly and emphatically, issuing what amounted to a public rejection of Illinois' approach and, by extension, the broader high-tax, heavy regulation model seen in many blue states. And it escalates further. These choices aren't random. They form a trend, a chain reaction. In the financial sector, something the New York political establishment refuses to face is this: when a heavyweight begins departing, it lowers the barriers for everyone else. The perceived downside of moving lessens. The networks that once tied professionals to the city start shifting as well. Restaurants favored by those executives see their clientele vanish. Office spaces sit vacant, and already pressured tax foundation shrinks even more, triggering a vicious cycle. That's not exaggeration. It's the precise term economists use for a negative feedback loop. And New York City is caught in one currently. The initial pieces began tipping years back. What we're seeing now is the speed up. Allow me to share a story about someone I'll refer to as Marcus, not his actual name, but the account draws from real conversations with finance workers navigating this exact situation. Marcus is 34, a mid-tier analyst at a prominent financial company with a Midtown Manhattan base. He's called New York home for 9 years, attended a strong university, climbed the ladder, earns a healthy six-figure income. By all standards, Marcus embodies the talent New York must keep: youthful, skilled, contributing economically, covering taxes, and fueling local businesses from eateries to fitness centers to housing. 2 years prior, his employer discreetly presented staff in select areas the chance to move to their emerging Texas base, complete with support for the transition. Marcus declined. He adored the city. Last year, the offer returned, this time sweetened with extra compensation to ease the change. Again, he turned it down. His partner was rooted there. His social circle, his entire routine. This year, no offer came. Instead, he learned his entire division would consolidate in Texas, eliminating his New York role. He got 30 days to choose, relocate, or take severance. Marcus is heading to Texas, yet politicians championing economic fairness rarely mention the ripple effects. It didn't end with him. His shared Manhattan rental is now listed again in an area already battling high vacancies. His regular dry cleaner lost steady business. The sushi spot he frequented several times weekly took an unexplained hit to sales. His girlfriend, employed in an unrelated field, is now contemplating a move herself, meaning her workplace. Her landlord, her local expenditures could follow. Scale Marcus up by thousands, tens of thousands, because that's the true magnitude. Every departing finance professional doesn't simply remove one income from the tax rolls. They drain an entire web of surrounding economic life. No amount of inspiring oratory reverses that loss. So what sparked this exodus? Let's trace the dollars. Make no mistake, New York City's troubles aren't random disasters like natural calamities or health crises, though the pandemic certainly hastened existing patterns. They're the logical, predictable, and entirely preventable outcome of intentional policy directions chosen by officials who valued ideological messaging above practical economics. Walk through the chronology with me. New York State's highest income tax bracket ranks near the top nationally at 10.9%, layered with an extra 3.876 cent city income tax for residents, yielding a combined state-local hit approaching 15% before federal obligations enter the picture. Contrast that with Texas at 0% state income tax, Florida at 0%, Tennessee at 0%. That's no small edge. It's a 15-point chasm that every high-income worker and executive in a New York firm notices with every pay stub. And that's prior to the regulatory weight. Business environment rankings place New York near the bottom for regulatory ease. Approvals that drag on for months here wrap up in weeks in Texas. Environmental rules pile on complexity here but simplify elsewhere. Labor laws inflate expenses and legal exposure here, while right-to-work states handle them differently. Add in safety and lifestyle elements, harder to measure but impossible for HR teams to dismiss when attracting talent. Employees voicing subway safety fears, executives citing underperforming schools for their kids, the reality that a modest midtown one-bedroom costs what buys a spacious home in Plano. These factors build up and drive choices. Politicians resist admitting the obvious. Companies aren't fleeing New York out of dislike. They're departing because they owe a duty to shareholders, staff, and customers to pursue sensible financial paths. And increasingly, unmistakably, painfully, that sensible path leads elsewhere. Then New York chose Zohran Mamdani, a democratic socialist whose campaign openly targeted corporate power, pushed for steep tax hikes on wealthy individuals and businesses, and sat firmly left of prior leaders. To be balanced, Mamdani's tenure is still fresh, and much of this momentum predates him. But consider the message his victory transmits to every JPMorgan director, Goldman partner, and hedge fund leader quietly observing New York's trajectory and weighing one straightforward query: will conditions improve or deteriorate? The mayor's apparent outrage over JPMorgan's strategic pullback speaks volumes, because this political group's reflex when facing logical market reactions to their own decisions isn't introspection. It's fury, finger-pointing, and lectures on corporate selfishness or disloyalty. Markets, however, ignore outrage. They follow incentives. And currently, every incentive built into New York City's policy framework signals leave. Consider what that broadcasts to the next firm debating headquarters placement, New York or Dallas, when they observe the mayor publicly condemning a business for pragmatic choices rather than examining what policy shifts might have retained them. What takeaway do you suppose they form? Meanwhile, Texas is executing something extraordinary. As New York loses financial expertise, Texas is deliberately, energetically, strategically drawing it in. The state has invested heavily in attraction efforts. Austin has solidified as a real center for tech and finance. The Dallas-Fort Worth region, already boasting more Fortune 500 HQs than anywhere outside New York, has gained even more amid the relocation wave. They're capturing not just firms but the talent, the revenue base, the consumer spending, property growth, dining scenes, school populations, the full economic network that accompanies skilled professionals. Florida is succeeding similarly. Miami has branded itself brilliantly as a finance-friendly substitute for New York. Sunny climate, no state income tax, a governor who directly invited financial leaders via social media and smoothed their transitions. Miami's financial corridor has surged. High-end property is thriving, fueled substantially by transplants from New York and California making calculated moves. These outcomes aren't coincidental. They stem directly from deliberate policy decisions. Texas and Florida opted to compete aggressively and tilt the equation their way. The payoff is dramatic, not minor. New York faced the same options. It consistently picked the opposite path. Now, I realize not everyone here lives in New York. You might be in Ohio, Georgia, Arizona, or rural Pennsylvania, thinking this is strictly a New York issue for its residents. Let me explain why that's mistaken. What's occurring in New York isn't confined. It's a harbinger, a live demonstration of what unfolds when progressive policies meet the unyielding fact of mobile capital. And capital's mobility isn't tomorrow's theory. It's today's economic truth everywhere. The sequence: elevated taxes, rising rules, anti-business language eroding livability, company departures, contracting revenue deficits, further tax hikes to plug gaps, accelerated departures, isn't exclusive to New York. Illinois has watched Chicago bleed financial firms for years. California has experienced such substantial high earner flight that its budget forecasts require constant downward adjustments. Here's what should alarm everyone. When flagship American cities weaken, their revenue erodes, services falter, schools, infrastructure, and public safety slip, the federal level eventually faces bailout pressure, meaning taxpayer funds from wherever you reside enter the discussion. Today's New York trajectory awaits any city mirroring those choices. This isn't partisan, it's math. And math remains indifferent to your politics. This marks a profound realignment in where American economic strength resides, one accelerating beyond most awareness and carrying nationwide repercussions, not limited to the hardest hit places. Here's the core takeaway, 3 points I want you to carry forward. First, JPMorgan's deliberate retreat from New York isn't a standalone corporate call. It's one marker in a broader trend of sensible economic players reacting to an unreasonable policy setting. When America's most storied financial giant begins scaling back from the city it helped shape, that's a blazing red alert. Second, the political reaction, rage, accusation, rejection actually worsens the issue. Solving any challenge starts with honest assessment. No city halts corporate exits by denying them or vilifying the levers. Third, economic downturn isn't locked in. Let me stress this clearly, this isn't unavoidable fate. Cities and states have turned similar trends around. The approaches that foster vibrant economies are identifiable, demonstrated, and repeatable. Outcomes stem from decisions, so altered decisions yield altered results. You hold influence, your ballot counts, especially in overlooked local races. Mayors, council members, state lawmakers who determine these tax levels and regulations are accountable to voters, or ought to be. Remain aware, involved, and insistent on improvement. Because every community deserves officials who recognize that economic strength and social advancement aren't opponents, they're allies.